Hello, this is Sean with Breaking Culture, and today I'm bringing you the first installment in our Media and Cultural Theory Case Studies series. The purpose of this series is to dig into a particular case study and use a key media theory. As I put it to my students, the point here is always to both use the theory to better understand the object you're looking at and to evaluate how useful this theory is based on what it helps explain about this object. Today, I want to look at the way that 9/11, and especially the televised events of 9/11, uh, can be better understood using Stuart Hall's theory of media and cultural encoding. Encoding and decoding come from a paper that Stuart Hall writes first in 1973, and then it's revised several times until it ends up in this 1982 collection, which may be where some of you have encountered it. He is a key figure in the field of cultural studies, critical race studies, and studies of nationalism and identity. As the founding director of the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies in Birmingham, England, Stuart Hall also spearheaded several collaborative research groups that were looking at the way that media helped to shape public opinion and ultimately vice versa. The idea of encoding is meant to speak to a few different other models for how information was distributed to viewers by the mass media. It was well understood that mass media like newspapers, radio, TV, and movies, where a single producer could have the power to distribute information to millions of viewers or readers, was a particularly powerful political force, though researchers found it difficult to explain just how this power worked. And I share this um, ad from the 1940s. This is a US newspaper ad. Um, uh, Speaking to one way of understanding this transfer of power through the mass media, which is that it's some sort of conspiracy. And our first models is that of the hypodermic model, where propaganda was assumed to be directly implanted into the viewer's mind. So the media has some information, it injects it into the conversation, and viewers sort of mindlessly accept it. One of the other theories that is often uh, uh, where this kind of hypodermic model is often described to is the theory of the culture industry, which is found in Horkheimer and Adorno's uh, Dialectic of Enlightenment, which said that the industrial process by which the mass media was produced necessarily made its products commodities that would reproduce a capitalist consciousness. Both of these were heavily criticized by the mainstream mass communications researchers, especially in the 1950s and 60s. Now, incidentally, many of these mass communications researchers were also working with advertisers and government officials to figure out how to make it more deterministic. So, in some ways, the critique of these models was actually that the media doesn't work that way. We need to figure out how to make it work that way. Uh, Hall and his colleagues responded to these critiques using the emergent work in semiotics, which I'll cover in the next lesson, and other linguistic and sociocultural theories of how meaning is made in communities. The framework that Hall produces in the article Encoding Decoding helps to answer one of these key questions that lingered in these earlier theories, which is how does the ideology produced behind the backs of the newscasters who are nonetheless responsible for producing it? In other words, what about the structure of the entire broadcasting situation makes it more likely that the information we receive is going to uphold these dominant hegemonic systems of meaning, even if the newscasters didn't come to work with that intention? And so that's something that we'll be watching as we see these newscasters trying to deal with the events unfolding on 9/11. Now, one of the key quotes that I appreciate from the encoding decoding article is this one, and I want to sort of begin with this as a kind of opening salvo to why 9/11 is a useful object to look at. In the article, Hall says, quote, a raw historical event cannot in that form be transmitted by, say, a television newscast. Events can only be signified within the oral visual forms of the televisual discourse. Now, it seems a little odd to say when you watch a live TV broadcast, it's not actually transmitting a historical event in a raw fashion, because that's the whole premise, is that you're watching something live. You're watching it as it unfolds. You're watching that raw historical event. But as we can see in the televisual newscast of 9/11, we don't actually entirely get that raw event. Um, Now, one way of kind of interpreting this or responding to what happened on 9/11 is that it is a very unusual raw event. One of the phrases that came up quite a bit right after this is the phrase "Welcome to the desert of the real." Now, there's a sort of theoretical background to this, which we don't have to get into very deeply. But cultural theorists immediately right after these events, cultural theorists like Slavoj Žižek began discussing how useful 9/11 was as an example of what Jacques Lacan and others call the real. That is, something that appears to exist outside of the frame of signification. The phrase "Welcome to the desert of the real" is taken from, at least in some part, from Jean Baudrillard's book Simulation and Simulacra, which was first published in 1983. But the phrase itself is made especially popular when both the book and the phrase appeared in the 1999 film The Matrix. And it's in this moment of the film when Morpheus is kind of showing Neo what the world looks like outside of this projected, simulated world of the Matrix, that it's total destruction, total decimation. There's no sun in the sky, no plants are growing. This is the desert of the real. Um, as Zizek pointed out in his uh, article, the terrorists themselves did not do this, at least according to his argument, to provoke the real material damage, although there was plenty of that, but for the spectacular effect of it. He cites the many disaster movies, and here he says, after watching so many disaster movies like Independence Day, and this is a clip from the film Independence Day, which you may or may not have seen, but in this film, aliens sort of invade the world, and at a very sort of key moment in the film, they're destroying these very important landmarks such as the White House in a very spectacular fashion, uh, as a way of kind of showing uh, they're destroying the culture, right? So Zizek says we were ready for this spectacle, but it was inverted. What happened on September 11th is that this screen's phantasmatic apparition entered our reality. It is not that reality entered our image; the image entered and shattered our reality. Now, on a very philosophical perspective or dimension, that may be true, but what we see in kind of real time is the attempt to take this eruption that interrupted the conventional spectacle of the mass media, and kind of see them trying to make sense of this raw event. So in that sense, 9/11 is an excellent case study in how the media makes that raw event mean something that remains acceptable to the dominant hegemonic interpretation, especially when the media is not, and the media sort of anchors are not given the instructions from the state, from anyone in the sort of dominant hegemonic apparatus, to tell them what's happening, what they should say, what they should believe. We can kind of see this encoding process, and that's what we'll be looking at as we watch these clips. The clips that we're watching, I'll be showing, are strung together from the Internet Archive's Understanding 9/11 TV News Archive, and I'll put a link to that archive in the show notes. We'll be looking at three moments. First, in the minutes right after the first plane hit the first tower, and then in the minutes right before the second plane hits the second tower, and then finally, less than 12 hours later, when a Fox affiliate in Washington, D.C. claims that the U.S. is at war with Afghanistan, which we weren't. I hope you'll sort of stick around for that clip and for the discussion. I will say, because of the encoding software that was available at the time, a lot of these clips are only 35 seconds long. So, in order to make a full kind of segment to look at, I've strung a few of them together. Sometimes there's a little overlap, but hopefully it won't be too disruptive. In addition to looking at the encoding decoding essay, I'm going to draw on another piece that Hall wrote a few years later called Culture, Media, and the Ideological Effect. One of the key phrases and quotes that I want to kind of start with as we look at these clips is this one. He says, in the selection of codes, those which are preferred, which appear to embody the natural explanations which most members of the society would accept, that is, which appear naturally to incarnate the rationality of our particular society, cast these problematic events concentrally somewhere within the repertoire of the dominant ideologies. This field of meanings seems to be, even to those who employ and manipulate them for the purposes of encoding, simply the sum of what we already know. Now, there's a lot to unpack in this particular quote, but two of the main things are that part of what a mass media broadcast is attempting to do is to speak to what, again, here, consensually, the dominant ideologies would say about this event, right? So we can kind of see that's part of what these newscasters are trying to do. We can see them struggling as we watch this clip. One of the key phrases that will come up quite a bit in each of these clips is the phrase, what we already know, or as we know, or as we should know. Uh, Perhaps most obviously in the moments when the newscasters are discussing something they don't actually know anything about. And so that's an interesting dynamic there. It's kind of telling you what you should know, what you should believe, making it almost unquestionable, right? So let's start with this first clip. Again, this is the clip after the first plane hits the first tower. It's about 4 minutes afterwards. Uh, so let's watch this clip.
We want to tell you what we know as we know it. We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at the World Trade Center in New York City. One report said, and we can't confirm any of this, that a plane may have hit one of the two towers of the World Trade Center. But again, you're seeing the live pictures here. We have no further details than that. We don't know anything about what they have concluded. What they have concluded happened there this morning. But we're going to find out and, of course, make sure that everybody knows on the air.
These are, of course, the two twin Trade Center buildings that are down at the foot of Manhattan, that they really are the beacons of New York. It was there that there was the explosion a couple of years ago, brought about by terrorists. That's all gone through the courts. But this, we don't know anything about. We don't know about anything that has happened here other than the fact that there's obviously been a major incident there. And we're going to go to a special report now from ABC News. There, and we're going to go to a special report now from ABC News.
This is an ABC News special report.
Now, by the entire ABC network. Good Morning America was in progress in the East Coast and the Midwest, but we're joined by the entire network just to show you some pictures at the foot of New York City. This is at the World Trade Center. Obviously, a major fire there. And there has been some sort of explosion. We don't fully know the details. There is one report, as of yet unconfirmed, that a plane has hit the World Trade Center, and you can see that there is smoke there coming out of at least two sides of the building.
And as you said, there are two towers, the tallest structures in Manhattan, on the island of Manhattan. We're trying to get people on the telephone to see what more we can learn. We have no idea if it was a plane. Was it in any sense deliberate? Was it an accident? It does seem to be that there is considerable and truly terrifying damage on some of those floors at the top.
This angle is a little deceptive. As you know, there are two Trade Center towers, and the second tower there is hidden behind the first. This is really almost the picture postcard of New York City. It's that and the Empire State Building, I guess, are the two most recognizable symbols of New York. There you can see the two, well, we had there for just briefly the other angle of the World Trade Center towers, but this is confined to one of the towers on the upper floors. These buildings, I think they're 110 stories each, so this would be in the top 15 or 20 floors there.
You mentioned earlier that, of course, as we all know, years ago there was that terrorist attack. It took place down on the ground and in the underground levels and the garage levels. But again, that's not to imply that we have any reason at this point to believe that this is terrorism or not. We simply don't know. And we simply don't know. And in just a few minutes, Peter Jennings is going to be joining us from the news desk uptown, where he's going to tell us everything that he knows. We also have Don Daler on the phone, and you know he's been with us on Good Morning America for a long time. And Don, where are you, and what do you know?
I'm about 4 or 5 blocks just north of the World Trade Center, and at about 10, I would say 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, there was a loud sound that I can only describe as it sounded like a missile, not an airplane. Then there was a loud explosion, and immediately lots of screaming out on the streets. And I don't want to cause any speculation, but that's the only way I could describe the sound, and it was definitely not the sound of a prop plane or anything like that.
And am I right? Are you a pilot?
Well, I have flown. I do not have a pilot's license. But I grew up on military bases, and I know the sound and heard those kinds of different sounds. And I've been in war zones, again, not to cause any kind of undue speculation, but the sound itself was not of a prop plane. It was perhaps a jet, but it could have been a missile as well.
Can you give me, was it a whining sound, Don, or what?
Yes, it was a how to describe it? It was a high-pitched, but it had a whooshing sound, not like a prop plane.
Huh. And you didn't see anything actually in the air?
No, I wasn't looking out, but we looked out immediately.
So this first clip, we see quite a few elements here. And we can kind of see the first level of this encoding in action in the first minute or so of the broadcast. When the anchors uh, shift, they shift their message, the audience, from not only Eastern and Central time zones, but to the national community as a whole. This highlights the way the technical ability to transmit at a national level is very important to the set of structures that create these meanings, right? And also, then, therefore, to the message that they believe they should be sending, right? So the time and space constraints order the broadcasts, right? The media of TV, the medium of TV makes it very difficult to get to kind of all the sides of a story, right? But there is the idea that you're going to, right? So bringing in Don Daler, bringing in other kind of voices helps you to kind of, I guess, present the spectacle of seeing every side. But because you have a very limited time, you have a very limited space, it's going to be difficult to have every side. So because of those time constraints, you have to sort of project what you believe other people will want to hear. And that national level broadcast is really important. We have similar problems with the space in newspapers. Um, it should be different on the web, but we do have filter bubbles. But this projection of a kind of national community is part of what other cultural critics like Benedict Anderson highlight as one of the innovations of what he called print capitalism, that allowed for the distribution of a message to a whole national community. And therefore, that meant that the people doing that distribution had to make certain decisions about what language they would use, what representations would be preferred, and so on. And in turn, the ability to send a message to these disconnected people also encouraged those people in the audience to think of themselves as part of the same community, as what Benedict Anderson called an imagined community, which he says exists in just about every community that's not based on a kind of face to face relationship. David Morley and others who were involved with the Birmingham School used Hall's framework to discuss the way that other national broadcasters, especially in Britain, necessarily constructed a sort of imagined community to which they would be speaking. And we can kind of see this several times in the broadcast. Them talking about going to a special report. We're going to be joined by the entire nation. We're going to kind of show you together what we know, and we're going to talk about what you know. Several times they say, as we all know. And that, as we all know, is not just talking about the people sitting in the studio, but all of the viewers. And this sort of collective we, all that we all know there was a terrorist attack. And it is important that within the first 5 minutes, they mention that terrorist attack twice. We can kind of see them struggling for a frame, but there's already one that's suggested. So this kind of points us to one of the other kind of elements The encoder wants to enforce the explanatory reach, as Hall says, the credibility and effectiveness of the sense uh, which he is making of the events. And I apologize for the he here. That's in the original, but obviously we mean they or he, she. Um, the viewer or the broadcaster will employ this whole repertoire of encodings to win consent in the audience, right? Not because, again, not for some sort of biased way of interpreting events, but for kind of, uh, I guess, anticipating the legitimacy of the range or limits to which those encodings are operating. And so some of this has to do with simply speaking to a national audience. Another element of it, though, is that this is a very concentrated media relation to production, right? There are very few corporations that own all of these networks. So as we can kind of see, I have kind of drawn a line here to where this particular broadcast fits in, although this is ABC News in 2001, which at the time wasn't actually owned by Disney, but now it is. These, network news remains one of the few very powerful sources of broadcasting, though it is waning with the fragmentation of the internet and social media. But the ownership structure is still an important determinant of who gets to sit in these chairs. Um, Particularly since the massive concentration of the media means that most of those chairs are owned by a very small handful of corporations. Now, we don't often see overt examples of censorship on the part of media owners, but in recent months, I'm recording this in the early fall of 2025, the Trump administration appears to be using its authority to approve media mergers to force concessions from broadcasters, as in the recent cancellation of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, who had been a fierce and reliable critic against the administration. This is a rare occurrence where this kind of censorship at the level of the media relations of production occurs, but the fact that it can illustrates that is one place where we see this. Um, at the last level, the frameworks of knowledge, this is where we have the most kind of important uh, aspect. And when we see that sort of, as we all know, as you know, is a shorthand for the conventional wisdom that the broadcasters must both produce and rely upon as they frame this event. And the fact that in this early clip they don't actually know what has happened, it makes it clear that they're searching for a frame which they can place around this raw event in order to make it make sense. But even in the absence of any serious information, within the first minute of that segment, they've already suggested the frame of a terrorist act twice by referring to the 1993 bombing at the World Trade Center parking garage. Um, and the final suggestion made by the on the ground, sometimes pilot Don Daler, that it might have been a missile, is an important example of the kind of wild speculation that occurs in a moment when the news encounters the real. Um, so we can kind of see these frameworks of knowledge not just in the discourse, but also in which experts are interviewed. This happens throughout the day. Where do you hear from people? Who do you hear from? What kinds of interviews? What kinds of images are used during interviews or voiceovers? Um, how the framing discourse works. This is all elements that the Glasgow University Media Group used to kind of talk about how especially labor disputes in Britain were framed the early during around the same time that Stuart Hall was writing this. Um, so we can kind of see these frameworks of knowledge that attempt to explain a kind of dominant hegemonic position rather than questioning it. This moment when Don Daler talks about it being a missile, in some ways, both illustrates this reliance on a frame and also kind of shows it what it looks like when it's slipping, um, because the kind of eruption of speculation at the end of this clip is an example of the kind of thing that conspiracy theorists latched onto in one of the first counter-hegemonic conspiracy moments of the age of Web 2.0. Here, the very limited availability of some broadcast archives made it possible to, among other things, find moments when this speculative framing could suggest a conspiracy to cover up the fact that, as this film argued, 9/11 was an inside job. We'll talk about what what the actual conspiracy was, but it is, I think, an important kind of illustration that there was a recognition among the people who were watching these clips that frame was slipping at certain moments, and the slipping of the frame for them illustrated that that frame was constructed by a conspiracy. Instead, what Hall wants to kind of talk about is the way that the mass media gets, even when the mass media gets the specifics of the framing and encoding wrong, mostly they end up ensuring the reproduction of that dominant hegemonic viewpoint. And as we look at this second clip, we can see this interpretation click into place immediately as the second plane hits the second tower. So as we watch this second clip, I want to kind of see the way that all of this continues to work together as the anchors struggle for a frame, and then the way that it immediately clicks into place once the second plane hits. Now, just a fair warning, it is a shocking clip, and the shock value is absolutely part of what made these events so traumatic for the national viewing audience that, again, had just been brought together to watch this event transpire. So let's watch this.
All speculative at this point. And just to reset for all of you, this is a special report from ABC News, and we are dealing, and we have to underline this, we are dealing purely in the realm of speculation here as to what may have happened at the World Trade Center. Obviously, a major incident occurred here on the upper floors of one of the World Trade Center towers. You can see multiple openings and flames coming out of at least two sides of the tower at the World Trade Center. And
we just got a report that the Associated Press is now reporting that it was an aircraft. So that's one more witness weighing in, or at least one more source weighing in on the fact that it was an aircraft of some kind.
And as Don Daler reported, this occurred about 15 or 20 minutes ago in downtown New York. And New York time, that would have been about 20 minutes or 8:45. This is a time when literally tens of thousands of people are coming to work at the World Trade Center.
Looking at the top of the building, you mentioned there's an observation center, and I don't know what time it opens, but I think it opens fairly early, and people are up. It opens, but I think it opens fairly early, and people are up there at all hours of the day. Families, tourists coming in to look at the city of New York from atop it. Also there, I don't know if this is the building that has the restaurant on top of it as well, but in those high floors, there are places where tourists team in the morning, even if the regular workers weren't in. And we remind you again that there was a terrorist bomb that did go off at the World Trade Center years ago. It was down in the garage level, but Trade Center years ago. It was down in the garage level, but we have no
Obviously
reason,
no
as we say
indication
over
that
and
this
over
could have
again,
been related to that. Right.
Now,
Don Daler, ABC's Don Daler, who is on the scene. Don, just give me some description again of what you can see now.
What we're seeing, it appears that there is more and more fire and smoke enveloping the very top of the building. And as fire crews are descending on this area, it does not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now, appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
Dear
Lord.
I did not see a plane go in. That just exploded.
We just saw another plane coming in from the side.
You did. That was out of
yes, and that's the second explosion. You could see the plane come in just from the right-hand side of the screen. So this looks like it is some sort of a concerted effort to attack the World Trade Center that is underway in downtown New York. That is underway in downtown New York.
We will see that scene again just to make sure we saw what we thought.
We're going to give you a replay of what we just saw, and I must admit I thought it was some sort of fire equipment coming in or some sort of observation plane, but it was obviously designed to attack the World Trade Center. We're going to show you that. Here's a replay of the videotape. In a second, that looks like a good-sized plane came in and hit the World Trade.
So to hammer home this conclusion, now, I mean, it's kind of clear as we kind of watch this image unfold, or this set of clips unfold. We can kind of see them again in the early part of this. Hold on. So as we can see in this clip, there is still this attempt at kind of speculating what's happening, putting it in that frame. There's mention uh, of the terrorist attack in 1993. There's also this sense of trying to help people absorb the magnitude of what's going on, speaking about the tourists in the top of the tower, speaking about the restaurant, trying to talk. Eventually, they talk a lot about other planes and other airports in the area, the way that that sort of plane routes are kind of going around the towers. So this is all a way of establishing their authority, establishing the expertise that they're bringing to this clip, and trying to kind of express what's important about what's happening. When that second plane hits, it is a traumatic event, and it does click this frame into place, right? And from that point on, for the rest of the day, there is a sense that this is an attack. Now, this attack doesn't just happen to New York, right? It happens around the country, and that's very important uh, to kind of think about this as something that's happening to this entire community, right? Um, and so one of the things that we can kind of see for that kind of Hall kind of hammers home is that though these events, he says, will not be systematically encoded in a single way, they will tend systematically to draw on a very limited ideological or explanatory repertoire. And that repertoire, though in each case it requires ideological work to bring new events within its horizon, will have the overall tendency of making things mean within the sphere of the dominant ideology. Now, we don't see that as much in these early clips, but as we kind of go through the rest of the day, when by the as most of us would know, by noon that day, both of the towers have collapsed. Another plane has crashed into the Pentagon, and a fourth plane was brought down by its passengers, alerted to their likely fate, who forced it to crash in rural Pennsylvania. All of this was broadcast in roughly real time throughout the day, alongside state and Defense Department speculation about who was responsible. Now, all of this, again, is bringing together a national audience to discuss this kind of national trauma and frame it as the entire country, the entire way of life being under attack. And this is the way that the president at the time frames it when he speaks to reporters. So after the second plane hit the second tower, President George W. Bush was notified while sitting in a children's read along at an elementary school in Florida. He was then quickly moved to secure locations and shuttled around the country on Air Force One until he lands and gives a short press conference at 3 o'clock at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, where he says the following.
Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
Now, the emerging narrative held that the primary suspect was a Saudi militant named Osama bin Laden, who had been mostly stationed in Afghanistan since the 1980s when he was trained by the US Armed Forces as part of the anti Soviet Mujahideen. As Arundhati Roy put it in an essay written during the run up to the war in Afghanistan, someone recently said that if Osama bin Laden didn't exist, America would have had to invent him. but in a way, America did invent him. He was among the jihadis who moved to Afghanistan in 1979 when the CIA commenced its operations there. Bin Laden has the distinction of being created by the CIA and wanted by the FBI. He had remained in Afghanistan after the state was taken over by the Taliban in the late 1990s, who permitted bin Laden and his Al Qaeda militants to remain in the country. It required all kinds of diplomatic and propaganda shenanigans to justify the war on Afghanistan, despite the country having no official part in the terrorist acts. So, by late September, Bush was demanding that the Taliban turn over bin Laden, as if they had the forces necessary to find him. And when the war finally began on October 7th, nearly a month later, it was a novel war against a state that had no part in the attacks. But as this clip shows, the news media was already prepared to defend that war by the evening of 9/11. At that time, none of the major networks had any correspondence in Kabul. Budget cuts and the general neoliberalization of the news industry was already well in its way, and Afghanistan was not seen as an important place to pay for staff. CNN, however, had a reporter with a video phone on the scene. And after hours of commercial free coverage of the events of the day, mostly beamed from the well staffed news bureaus of New York and Washington, D.C., and even rural Pennsylvania, many of the major networks picked up CNN's news feed from this video phone. Now, though it wasn't clear what was actually happening at the time, the Northern Alliance, the Taliban's main rivals in the civil war there, were shooting rockets at targets in and near Afghanistan's capital city. The frame of 9/11 and the potential war with that country clicked quickly into place for many U.S. anchors. And that's especially the case for the Fox News anchors that were watching this unfold at the Washington, D.C. affiliate. So I just want to watch this clip. And again, one of the key phrases we can hear over and over is as you know, as we know, and kind of note the way that these anchors immediately are ready to frame the legitimacy of this war.
Dulles.
So what will you do now?
Wait and watch. I got some friends that are going to try and come and get me and hopefully get back to Dallas tomorrow.
All right, Rod, thank you. Somebody else I want you to meet, Charlotte. She's a native. Can we please see your
video right now? Can we cut Will's mic there very quickly? He can't hear us very clearly. Take a look at what's on your screen right now.
We understand that the United States government is now bombing Afghanistan. You are looking at live pictures coming in from our affiliate CNN feeding this into us. You can see off in the distance some smoke, and you are looking at live pictures coming in from our affiliate CNN feeding this into us. You can see off in the distance some smoke and what looks like perhaps some buildings that have been hit. You can see the orange glow from flames. We don't know at this point. Well, you can see what looks like another explosion happening right now to the right center of your screen. We don't know at this point exactly what buildings are.
The thing that is probably the most impressive about this is that the United States has, almost 9 hours now after the first incident, has struck back. Afghanistan, as we heard from our terrorism experts who spoke to us just moments ago, has been the home for terrorist organizations. Afghanistan has allowed them to stay there. In terms of Osama bin Laden, who has been sought internationally ever since the Trade Center bombing, has managed to avoid any kind of law enforcement. International police and international intelligence communities have never been able to lay a hand on him. At this point in time, the United States apparently has now executed an attack on the place that he has called home.
And I suppose we should not be surprised because earlier in the day, President Bush said that the United States would be responding in a very swift manner and would be taking very strong action, and I suppose that is what we are looking at right now.
In the discussions that took place today, we understand that here was our Secretary of State is flying back from Peru. This video is just amazing what you're seeing there, rockets going through the air right now. The Secretary of State flying back from Peru, the President on the road, as it were, flying from Florida, where he had been when he got the first word of the first airplane hitting the towers. And then, of course, after that, and then speaking to reporters at Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. We understand the president is on his way back here. We're not sure exactly when he will arrive back in Washington. But obviously, in the talks they've had, they got together and put a plan together right away.
But we do know that President Bush will be addressing the nation from the White House this evening at 9 p.m. So we've been with you all morning long, throughout the afternoon, and well into the evening now. And we invite you to stay with us because we will be bringing you that address live as it happens tonight from the White House at 9 p.m.
We're trying to get more information for you as to exactly what you're seeing. We know where this is taking place. We don't know.
So again, although the U.S. actually took another few weeks to launch its 20-plus year war on Afghanistan on October 7th, a date that has a whole new meaning now, here we can see the news media, or at least one group of anchors, scrambling to defend what would have been an even more obviously illegal and irrational war in Afghanistan, using the phrases discussed above. We do know, as our expert has told us, as the president said. They provide explanation for a war that isn't yet occurring. The encoding, as Stuart Hall might put it, is that the government's use of force is completely legitimate and understandable, an excuse they are prepared to provide even when the violence is actually committed by someone else completely. This is an attempt to secure hegemony in action and a clear example of how encoding works. 9/11, therefore, provides an excellent example of how the media works to secure hegemony, even if that is not what they set out to do. Um, uh, Contrary to most of the conspiracy theories about the event, the actual conspiracy was to take the myths of 9/11 and to weaponize them to mobilize a war against a country that had absolutely nothing to do with it, which is not Afghanistan, but Iraq, where we commenced a war 2 years later in 2003. And I will talk a bit about the concept of myth and semiotics in a future video. But meanwhile, I recommend this documentary from the Media Education Foundation to talk about what we could say is the actual conspiracy around 9/11. So thanks for your attention, and I look forward to your comments and questions. Till next time, bye.